Ambassador Jake Morrison stood before the Galactic Council chamber and felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes upon him. Though he kept his face calm and professional, as he had learned during his 20 years of military service before becoming Earth's representative to the stars, the council chamber was massive. Built inside a space station that orbited neutral territory between 12 different species' home systems. And the architecture reflected technologies humanity was still trying to understand after only 1 year as junior. Members of this ancient organization, High Arbiter Kellyan, sat at the center of the raised platform, his crystalline body reflecting the soft blue lights that illuminated the chamber. He was ancient beyond human comprehension, his species having founded the council 3,000 years before Earth had even developed writing. To Jake's left sat Counselor Vesh, a reptilian creature whose scales shifted between green and bronze depending on his mood. And right now, those scales were definitely showing more bronze than usual, which Jake had learned meant irritation or contempt. The human speaks of security patrols, Vesh said, his voice carrying across the chamber with a hissing quality that made Jake's translator work overtime. As if his species could offer anything of value to races who mastered space travel while humans were still climbing trees. Several council members made sounds that Jake's cultural database identified as laughter, though it came from throats and vocal structures nothing like human ones. Lisa Grant stood behind Jake's chair, her role as diplomatic aide giving her the perfect position to observe everything happening in the chamber. And she noticed how her ambassador's jaw tightened just slightly at Vesh's words, a sign that only someone who knew Jake well would catch. Counselor Vesh, Jake said, keeping his voice level and respectful, Earth has dealt with piracy and territorial disputes for thousands of years. We have experience that might prove useful to the council's current situation. Experience, another counselor spoke up, this one resembling something between a bear and an insect, with mandibles that clicked when she talked. You mean the experience of a prey species that has no natural weapons, no armor plating, no venom or claws? More laughter rippled through the chamber. Jake remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back in a military rest position that he had never quite abandoned even after leaving the service. And he thought about all the battles he had seen, all the wars humanity had fought before finally achieving global peace. 30 years ago, the Council had reviewed Earth's history during the admission process. But they had focused on humanity's lack of biological weapons, their soft skin and breakable bones, their need for specific atmospheric conditions just to breathe. They had looked at humans and seen weakness, prey animals that had somehow stumbled into space travel through luck or accident. What they had not understood, what Jake could not make them understand through words alone, was that humanity's greatest strength had never been physical. The matter is settled, High Arbiter Kellyan said, his voice like crystal chimes in a gentle wind. The Council appreciates Earth's offer, but we have peacekeeping forces stationed throughout the Outer Rim. The pirate raids are an inconvenience, nothing more. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to tell them that dismissing threats as mere inconveniences was how civilizations fell. But his diplomatic training held firm and he simply nodded his acceptance. Lisa leaned forward slightly and whispered into his ear, Captain Burke just sent a priority message. The CSS Horizon is 3 hours away from the Outer Rim trade route. Jake acknowledged this with a small nod, knowing that Danny Burke commanded the only human military vessel currently stationed in Council space, a mid-sized ship that the Council had allowed as part of Earth's admission agreement. The Council continued their session, discussing trade agreements and resource allocation with the casual indifference of beings who had never truly faced an existential threat, whose civilizations had evolved in relatively peaceful corners of the galaxy, where the greatest dangers came from environmental hazards rather than hostile species. Vesh spoke again, addressing the Council rather than Jake directly. I propose we classify humanity as a protected species. They clearly lack the biological advantages necessary for true galactic citizenship and should be treated as such. Objection, Jake said firmly, stepping forward from his position. Earth did not join this council to be treated as children who need protection. No, Vesh replied, his scales now fully bronze with what Jake was certain was contempt. You joined because you had no choice. Your system is surrounded by council space, and you needed our trade routes to survive. The truth in those words stung. But Jake could not deny them. Lisa's tablet chimed softly, and she looked down at the message, her face going pale. She touched Jake's arm and showed him the screen, where emergency codes flashed in red priority. Markers a civilian convoy was under attack in the Outer Rim. Multiple species ships caught in an ambush by what early reports indicated was a massive pirate fleet. And the attack was happening in the sector that Earth had volunteered to patrol. The same sector the Council had dismissed as unimportant. Arbiter Kellyan, Jake said loudly, interrupting another counselor who had been speaking about mining rights. I request immediate permission to address the Council on an emergency matter. The chamber fell silent, and Kellyan's crystalline form seemed to brighten slightly. Speak, Ambassador Morrison. A civilian convoy is under attack in Sector 7 of the Outer Rim. Early reports suggest at least 12 hostile vessels and multiple casualties already confirmed. The council chamber erupted in concerned voices and clicking mandibles and hissing breaths. Sector 7, Kellyan said, his voice cutting through the chaos. That is the region where Earth offered to provide security patrols. Yes, Jake confirmed. And the CSS Horizon is the closest vessel. Captain Burke is already moving to intercept. Vesh made a sound like contemptuous laughter. 1 human ship against 12 pirates? This will be a short battle indeed. I request that the Council deploy peacekeeping forces immediately, Jake said, knowing even as he spoke that it would take hours for any Council ships to reach the convoy. The Council will observe, Kellyan decided. Our long-range sensors can monitor the situation. Let us see what humanity does when faced with real danger. When they cannot hide behind diplomatic words and treaties. Lisa met Jake's eyes, and he could see the same thought reflected there that was running through his own mind. The Council was using this as a test, letting human civilians and the civilians of other species die just to prove their point. About humanity's weakness, Jake pulled out his personal communicator and opened a direct channel to the CSS Horizon. Captain Burke, this is Ambassador Morrison. Danny Burke's face appeared on the small screen, and Jake could see the bridge of his ship behind him, with crew members moving quickly through their stations. I see it, Ambassador. We're 3 hours out at maximum speed. The Council is watching, Jake said quietly. They expect you to fail. Danny's expression did not change, but something in his eyes went cold and distant. Something Jake recognized from their years serving together before diplomacy became Jake's calling. Tell the Council to watch carefully then. Tell them to watch very carefully. The communication ended and Jake looked up at the assembled Council members who were already pulling up display screens to monitor the approaching battle. What will 1 ship do against 12? Vesh asked mockingly, will the humans run? Will they call for help? Jake stood perfectly still and remembered the last time he had seen that expression in Danny Burke's eyes. Back during the resource wars when their unit had been outnumbered and surrounded, and everyone expected them to surrender. They had not surrendered. Counselor Vesh, Jake said softly, you are about to learn something important about humanity. And what is that? That we are not prey, Jake replied. We just chose to act like it. The Council chamber fell silent as the first feeds from the battle zone began appearing on screens throughout the room. And Jake Morrison stood watching with his hands clasped behind his back while somewhere in the darkness of space, humanity was about to remind the galaxy of something it had forgotten. that the most dangerous predators are the ones you never see coming until they have already decided to strike. Captain Danny Burke watched the tactical display as red markers multiplied across his screen, each one representing a hostile vessel moving into attack formation around the civilian convoy that was trying desperately to escape into faster-than-light travel. 12 confirmed hostiles. Lieutenant Amy Chun reported from her tactical station, her fingers moving across holographic controls with practiced precision, all heavy cruiser class or larger. They are jamming the convoy's FTL drives. Danny leaned back in his command chair and considered his options with the calm deliberation that had kept him alive through 3 major conflicts and dozens of smaller engagements during his military. Commander Greg Phillips stood beside the captain's chair, his face showing the concern that his training said he should voice. "Sir, we are 1 ship against 12. Standard protocol suggests we call for reinforcements and maintain a defensive position. Standard protocol assumes we have time to wait for reinforcements," Danny replied, his eyes never leaving the tactical display where civilian ships were taking fire, their shields failing one by one under the coordinated assault. "How long until those convoy ships start losing hull integrity?" Amy checked her sensors, and her voice was tight when she answered. "First ship will breach in 7 minutes. After that, we will start seeing casualties." 7 minutes meant that families would die, that children would suffocate in the cold vacuum of space, that beings who had committed no crime except traveling through what they thought was protected territory would cease to exist. Danny had not joined Earth's space fleet to watch innocents die. "Kevin," he said to the young man at the helm controls, "maximum burn to intercept. I want us between those pirates and the convoy in 6 minutes." "Yes, sir," Kevin Torres responded immediately, his hands already adjusting their course. And the CSS Horizon's engines flared bright as they pushed toward combat speed on the bridge of the lead pirate vessel. Warlord Kreeth watched his prey trying to scatter like frightened animals and felt satisfaction warming his 3-chambered heart. This convoy carried valuable cargo, and the species on board would fetch good prices in the slave markets of the outer systems. His communications officer made a chittering sound. "Commander, we have an incoming vessel. Identification reads as CSS Horizon, registered to the human species." Kreeth searched his memory for information about humans and found almost nothing beyond the basic facts. A new council species, physically weak, no natural weapons or defensive capabilities. Classified as having evolved on a mid-level danger world with no significant predators. 1 ship? He asked, amused by the absurdity. Confirmed. 1 mid-sized human vessel approaching at high speed. Kreeth decided this would be entertaining. Open a channel. Let us see if these humans can be reasonable. The view screen flickered and showed the bridge of the CSS Horizon with a human male sitting in the command chair, his face calm and completely unafraid in a way that made something in Kreeth's predatory instincts suddenly uncertain. "This is Captain Danny Burke of the CSS Horizon," the human said, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone making a statement rather than a request. "You are attacking civilian vessels in human-protected space. You have 1 opportunity to withdraw your forces and leave this system." Kreeth laughed, a barking sound that his species used to show dominance. "1 human ship offers us an ultimatum? Your species knows nothing of warfare. You have no claws, no venom, no armor. You are prey, pretending to be predators." The human captain's expression did not change. "You were warned." The channel closed. Kreeth shared the recording across all pirate vessels on their tactical network, and the laughter echoed through multiple ships as his fleet moved to surround the approaching human vessel, their weapons charging and targeting systems locking onto the CSS Horizon from 12 different angles. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, The display screens showed the tactical situation clearly. One human ship being surrounded by a pirate fleet that outnumbered and outgunned it by factors that made victory mathematically impossible. They should run, one counselor said, her voice worried despite her earlier dismissal of human capability. Surely their captain understands basic mathematics? Perhaps humans are stupider than we thought, Vesh suggested. Though his scales had shifted to a darker bronze that indicated uncertainty rather than contempt. They will die for nothing. Ambassador Jake Morrison watched the screens and said nothing, his face a mask that revealed nothing of what he was thinking or feeling. Though Lisa Grant stood beside him and could see the tension in his shoulders on the CSS horizon, Danny Burke watched the pirate ships moving into position and felt something old and cold awakening in his chest. Something that humanity had tried to leave behind when they reached for the stars, but had never quite forgotten. Greg, he said quietly, begin evacuation protocols for the civilian convoy. Get them clear of the combat zone. Already underway, sir, Greg confirmed. And Danny could hear in his first officer's voice that he understood what was about to happen. Amy, Danny continued, still watching the tactical display. Activate weapon systems. Full combat loadout. Yes, sir, Amy responded. And her fingers moved across controls that had not been touched since the CSS Horizon left Earth's orbit. Systems that the Galactic Council had been assured were purely defensive in nature across the bridge. Status indicators began shifting from blue to red as weapon systems came online. And crew members who had been running standard patrol operations suddenly moved with the coordinated precision of trained soldiers responding to threat conditions. Captain, Kevin said from the helm, we are entering their weapons range. All power to forward shields, Danny ordered, and cut engines to minimum. Let them think we are afraid. The CSS Horizon's speed dropped dramatically, and the pirate ships tightened their formation. Moving closer to ensure their prey could not escape, Warlord Kreef watched the human ship slow and felt vindication. They realized their mistake. They are preparing to surrender. His tactical officer made an uncertain sound. Commander, our sensors are detecting unusual energy readings from their vessel. Their power distribution is changing in ways we do not recognize. Prey always thrashes before dying. Kreef dismissed the concern. Prepare boarding parties. I want that ship intact. In the council chamber, Counselor Vesh spoke loudly. The humans have stopped. They will surrender or die. Jake Morrison turned away from the screens and walked toward the council platform. His movements deliberate and controlled. High Arbiter Kellyan, I request that you ensure all council members are watching their displays very carefully. Why? Kellyan asked, his crystalline voice curious. Because, Jake said. And for the first time since entering council service, he allowed his diplomatic mask to slip and show the old soldier underneath. You asked earlier what humanity would do when faced with real danger. Yes? You are about to receive your answer on the CSS Horizon. Danny Burke sat forward in his command chair, and his voice was cold and clear when he spoke. The words he had not spoken in 20 years. Not since the last war, humanity fought before achieving peace, weapons-free. All targeting solutions approved. Number survivors among hostile vessels. Amy's hands moved, and something shifted in the darkness of space. Something that the Galactic Council had not anticipated, and the pirate fleet had not prepared for. Show them, Danny said quietly. Show them why Earth survived. The CSS Horizon's hull plating split along predetermined lines and weapon arrays that had been hidden beneath civilian-looking exterior panels deployed into firing positions. Dozens of weapon systems that represented centuries of human innovation in the art of warfare guns that could accelerate projectiles to percentages of light. Speed missile tubes loaded with warheads designed to crack through shields using electromagnetic pulses, directed energy weapons that had been refined through decades of research. into making violence more efficient point defense systems that could track and eliminate thousands of incoming threats per second, and all of it controlled by human crew members whose species had evolved as pursuit predators, whose biology had been shaped by millions of years of learning to hunt, whose brains had developed pattern recognition and spatial awareness specifically for tracking and killing prey. Fire, Captain Danny Burke ordered, and the CSS Horizon transformed from a peaceful exploration vessel into exactly what it had always been underneath the diplomatic exterior, a weapon designed by a species that had spent its entire existence perfecting the art of survival through superior violence. The first railgun volley crossed the distance between the CSS Horizon and the pirate fleet in less than 2 seconds, and 3 pirate vessels simply ceased to exist as tungsten projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed punched through their shields like they were not even there. Warlord Kreeth stared at his tactical display in disbelief as 3 of his ships vanished from sensors. No explosion or debris field, just gone because the kinetic energy had been so massive that it had vaporized metal and organic matter into component atoms. Evasive maneuvers, he screamed into his communication system. But human weapons were already tracking his remaining 9 ships with a precision that suggested the targeting systems knew where his vessels would be before his own pilots made their decisions. Lieutenant Amy Chun watched her tactical board with the calm focus of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario her entire career. And her fingers moved across controls, adjusting firing solutions faster than the pirate ships could react. 2 hostile vessels attempting to break formation, she reported, her voice level and professional, compensating for predicted vector changes. Firing solution locked. Execute, Captain Danny Burke confirmed. And more railgun rounds streaked across space, followed by missiles that adjusted their courses mid-flight using guidance systems that made them nearly impossible to evade. The CSS Horizon moved through space in ways that should not have been possible for a vessel of its size, pulling acceleration vectors that would have turned most species' internal organs into liquid paste. But human biology was different. Millions of years of evolution on a planet with stronger gravity than most civilized worlds. Bodies that had adapted to survive falls and impacts that would kill other species. Cardiovascular systems designed to function under extreme stress conditions. Kevin Torres, at the helm, felt the crushing pressure of 8 gravities pushing him into his seat. Felt his vision narrowing at the edges as blood struggled to reach his brain. But his hands never stopped moving across the controls because humans had learned to function through pain that would incapacitate others in the Galactic Council chamber. View screens showed telemetry data from both the CSS Horizon and the remaining pirate vessels. And what council members saw made them question everything they thought they knew about human capability. Their crew should be unconscious, the insect-like counselor said, her mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. Those acceleration forces are beyond safe limits for any species we have documented, not for humans, Ambassador Jake Morrison said quietly, watching the battle unfold with an expression that mixed pride with deep sadness. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times standard galactic measure. We evolved to handle forces that would break your bones. Counselor Vesh stared at the tactical displays, his scales shifting through colors that indicated confusion and growing fear. But their biology reports showed weakness. No armor, no weapons, easily damaged physical structure. You looked at what we do not have, Jake replied. You never asked what we do have. What humans had was pattern recognition, evolved from tracking prey across vast distances. Spatial awareness refined through 3-dimensional hunting in forests and oceans. Hand-eye coordination developed specifically for throwing projectiles at moving targets. What humans had was the ability to suppress pain and fear through sheer force of will. to continue fighting with injuries that would stop other species. To coordinate as groups with communication so efficient, it seemed like telepathy. What humans had was innovation born from being relatively weak prey, animals that survived by becoming better predators than anything else on their world. On his command ship, Warlord Kreeth watched another 2 vessels get disabled by precision strikes that took out their engines while leaving the rest of the ship intact. And he realized with growing horror that the humans were not trying to kill his crews. They were hunting. The CS Horizon moved through his formation like a shark through a school of fish, and every movement was calculated. Every shot placed exactly where it needed to be for maximum effect. Target their weapon systems, Danny Burke ordered, his voice cold and emotionless. I want them alive to spread the message. Amy adjusted her targeting parameters, and the CSS Horizon's weapon spoke again. This time, with electromagnetic pulse bursts that fried electronic systems without destroying hulls. Leaving pirate ships dead in space with crews intact but powerless, Greg Phillips monitored damage control readouts and reported forward shields at 70%. Minor hull damage on decks 4 and 5. No casualties. Redirect shield power, Danny commanded. Focus on protecting the civilian convoy exit vector. The human ship moved again, positioning itself between the fleeing civilian vessels and the remaining pirate ships. And its weapons never stopped firing with mechanical precision that suggested the crew had trained for exactly this scenario thousands of times, because they had every human military vessel crew spend hundreds of hours in combat simulations, running scenarios against superior numbers and advanced technology, learning to adapt and overcome through superior tactics rather than superior force. Humans did not win battles by being stronger. They won by being smarter, faster, more adaptable, and absolutely relentless. Kreeth tried one final desperate maneuver, ordering his remaining ships to focus all fire on the CSS Horizon simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm their defenses through sheer volume multiple targeting locks, Amy reported. All remaining hostile vessels firing. Nicole, Danny said, addressing his weapons officer, who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Show them our point defense system. Weapons officer Nicole Carter activated the defensive grid. And what happened next made council observers question whether they were watching reality or some kind of elaborate simulation. The CSS Horizon sprouted what looked like thousands of tiny laser emitters across its hull, and they began firing at incoming projectiles and missiles with impossible accuracy, creating a sphere of destruction around the ship that nothing could penetrate. Point defense operating at 30% capacity, Nicole reported calmly. Current threat level does not require full activation. The pirate weapons fire that should have overwhelmed human shields was simply erased from existence before it could connect. And the CSS Horizon continued its methodical dismantling of the hostile fleet in the council chamber. High Arbiter Kellyan's crystalline body had shifted to a deep amber color that his species used to indicate profound revelation. They have been holding back. Yes, Jake confirmed, watching the battle with eyes that had seen similar scenes during humanity's wars. We have been holding back since the day we met you. But why? Another counselor asked, his voice bewildered. If humans possess such capability, why pretend to be weak? Jake turned to face the council, and his expression was tired. Because we have seen what happens when species rely on strength alone. We fought wars on Earth that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. We killed millions of our own kind, perfecting the weapons you are watching right now. And you chose to hide this from us? We chose peace, Jake said firmly. We chose to join your council as partners, not conquerors. We chose to hope that we would never need to show you this side of humanity on the tactical display. The last pirate vessel attempted to flee, and the CSS Horizon pursued it with the patience of a hunter that knows its Prey cannot escape. Danny watched the fleeing ship and felt no satisfaction in what came next. Only grim necessity. Kevin, intercept course. Amy, disable their engines, but leave life support intact. The CSS Horizon caught the fleeing pirate vessel within minutes, and precise weapons fire left it drifting in space with its crew alive, but their ship completely disabled. Open a channel, Danny ordered. Broadcast on all frequencies. The communication screen activated and Danny Burke looked into the camera, knowing that his words would be heard not just by the spied pirate crews, but by the Galactic Council and, eventually, by every spacefaring species that monitored these channels. To any who witnessed what happened here today, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction, spread this message across every system, every station, every ship. Humanity protects those under our watch. We do not seek conflict. We do not desire conquest. But we will not allow innocents to be harmed in space we have pledged to defend. He paused, letting the words settle, letting the image of his battle-scarred ship and the disabled pirate fleet serve as visual emphasis. Test that truth at your own extinction. Danny continued, because when humans make a promise, we keep it. When we offer protection, we deliver it. And when we say that someone is under our guardianship, we mean that we will burn down entire fleets to keep them safe. The channel closed in the council chamber. Absolute silence reigned for several long moments as the full implications of what they had witnessed settled over the assembled. Representatives Councillor Vesh broke the silence, his voice shaking. What have we allowed into our council? Jake Morrison met his eyes, and his response was quiet but clear. Not predators seeking prey, he said, but guardians who know how to hunt. The CSS Horizon began rescue operations for the disabled pirate crews because humans believed that even enemies deserve basic dignity. And the civilian convoy jumped to faster-than-light travel, safe and protected because one human ship had chosen to stand between them and death. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 hours after the battle ended, and the chamber atmosphere was completely different from the casual dismissiveness that had characterized their earlier meetings. High Arbiter Kellyan stood at his platform, his crystalline form now displaying deep amber mixed with streaks of blue that indicated both revelation and concern. Ambassador Morrison, the Council requires clarification regarding the events we witnessed. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the chamber floor, no longer at the petitioner's position, but in the place usually reserved for species, giving testimony of critical importance. And Lisa Grant stood beside him with a data tablet containing information that would change galactic politics forever. What clarification does the Council require? Jake asked, his tone respectful but no longer deferential one of the counselors. A being resembling a floating jellyfish with bioluminescent organs spoke in a voice like bubbling water. Our sensors recorded biological data from your crew during combat. Their stress hormone levels were beyond anything we have documented in any known species. Adrenaline, Lisa said, stepping forward with permission. It is a chemical humans produce in response to danger. It increases strength, sharpens reflexes, dulls pain, and allows us to function beyond our normal physical limits. This is a biological weapon? Another counselor asked nervously. No, Jake corrected. It is a survival mechanism. Every human produces it automatically when threatened. The insect-like counselor's mandibles clicked rapidly. Our medical analysis of human biology indicated you were a weak species. Soft skin, no natural armor, easily damaged skeletal structure. Correct, Jake agreed. Humans are physically vulnerable compared to many species. Then how? Counselor Vesh demanded. His scales now a pale bronze that indicated genuine confusion rather than contempt. How did your crew survive acceleration forces that should have liquefied their internal organs? Lisa activated her tablet and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing Earth rotating slowly in space. This is humanity's home world. You classified it as a Class 12 death world during our admission review. Class 12 indicates higher than average gravity and atmospheric pressure, the floating counselor noted. But not extreme by galactic standards. Not extreme, Lisa agreed, but significant. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times what the Council considers standard, and our atmospheric pressure at sea level is higher than most civilized worlds. Humans evolved in conditions that required physical adaptations to survive. She changed the display to show various Earth animals. Lions hunting zebras, wolves chasing deer, sharks patrolling oceans, eagles diving from the sky. You also classified our planet as having an unusual concentration of apex predators. Lisa continued. What you did not understand is that humans survived by becoming better predators than everything else. You are herbivores. Vesh protested weakly. Your teeth are not designed for tearing flesh. We are omnivores. Jake corrected. We can eat both plants and animals. We can survive in almost any environment because we adapted to consume whatever food was available. Lisa pulled up more data. Historical records that humanity had provided during their council admission, but which no one had apparently studied carefully. Earth's recorded history includes over 15,000 documented wars. The council chamber erupted in shocked sounds from multiple species. 15,000? High Arbiter Kellyan's voice cut through the chaos. Surely that number is incorrect? That is only the conflicts large enough to be recorded, Lisa said quietly. Local battles, skirmishes, and small-scale violence number in the hundreds of thousands. She changed the display to show images from human history. Ancient warriors with swords and spears, medieval knights in armor, soldiers with rifles in muddy trenches, tanks rolling across battlefields, aircraft dropping bombs, mushroom clouds rising over cities. We fought with rocks and sticks. Lisa narrated as images flowed across the displays, then with bronze and iron. We invented crossbows and longbows and firearms. We built cannons and machine guns and artillery. We created chemical weapons and biological weapons and finally nuclear weapons, capable of destroying our entire civilization. And you used these weapons? A counselor asked, horrified. Yes, Jake said simply. During what we call World War II, over 70 million humans died. During our resource wars, another 40 million perished. We poisoned our own atmosphere, irradiated our own land, and came within hours of complete nuclear annihilation 3 separate times. The council sat in stunned silence. Commander Paul Henderson entered the chamber, his military uniform marking him as distinct from the diplomatic staff. And he carried additional data that made the situation even clearer. High Arbiter Kellyan, Paul said, his voice carrying the formality of military briefings. I have been asked to provide tactical analysis of the engagement you observed. Proceed. Kellyan authorized. Paul activated his own display system, showing the battle from a tactical perspective. Captain Burke was operating under severe restrictions during that engagement. The CSS Horizon deployed approximately 20% of its full combat capability. 20%? Vesh repeated, his voice barely audible. Correct, Paul confirmed. Council regulations prohibit military vessels from carrying certain weapon systems in Council space. We complied with these restrictions despite the tactical disadvantage. What weapons did you not deploy? Kellyan asked. Paul listed them methodically. Nuclear missiles, antimatter warheads, gravitic disruptors, autonomous drone swarms, chemical agents, biological warfare systems, and several other categories that humanity developed during our various conflicts. You have all of these weapons? The jellyfish counselor asked, its bioluminescence flickering in distress. We have them, Paul confirmed. And we chose not to bring them to Council space because we hoped we would never need them. Lisa brought up more data, this time showing Earth's current status: peaceful cities, thriving agriculture, space stations in orbit, colonies on Mars and Europa. 30 years ago, she explained, humanity nearly destroyed itself in the resource wars. We were fighting over water, food, energy, and territory. We had weapons that could end all life on Earth, and we came very close to using them. What stopped you? Kellyan asked quietly. We chose to stop, Jake said. And his voice carried the weight of that decision. We looked at what we had become, at the millions dead and the billions suffering. And we decided that survival was more important than victory. You achieved global peace, another counselor observed. Your admission data showed no major conflicts for 3 decades. Yes, Jake agreed. We ended our wars, not because we became weak, but because we finally understood that our greatest threat was ourselves. We turned our weapons technology toward space exploration, our military tactics toward crisis response, our competitive nature toward scientific advancement, Paul added grimly. But we never forgot how to fight. Every human military officer trains in combat tactics. Every human vessel carries weapons. Every human colony maintains defensive capabilities. We chose peace, but we remain prepared for war. Why? Vesh asked, and for the first time, his voice held respect rather than contempt. Why maintain such readiness if you truly wanted peace? Because, Jake said, meeting the counselor's eyes, peace only lasts as long as those who value it are capable of defending it. We learned that lesson in blood across thousands of years. Weakness invites aggression. Strength without aggression invites respect. Lisa changed the display one final time, showing biological scans of human crew members during the battle. And what the data revealed made the council members understand the true human heart rates during combat. Elevated but controlled human stress responses. Active but managed human decision-making. Faster and more efficient under pressure human coordination. Improved during high-stress situations. You see? Lisa explained, humans do not just tolerate combat stress. We evolved to perform better under those conditions. Our biology treats fighting as a normal state, not an exceptional one. We are comfortable in chaos. You are predators, the insect counselor said. Not as an insult, but as a statement of fact. We were predators. Jay corrected. We chose to become something else. We chose to become protectors. High Arbiter Kellyan was quiet for a long moment, his crystalline form shifting through colors as he processed everything they had learned. The council made an error in judgment, he finally said, his voice carrying formal acknowledgement. We saw your lack of biological weapons and assumed weakness. We saw your peaceful approach and assumed naivety. We saw your restraint and assumed inability. You saw what we wanted you to see, Jake admitted, because we hoped that showing you our peaceful intentions would be enough. And now? Now you know the truth, Jake said. Humanity is capable of great violence. We have perfected the art of war over thousands of years and across countless battles. We can destroy civilizations if we choose to. He paused, letting that truth settle over the council. But we also choose not to, he continued. We choose to offer protection instead of conquest, cooperation instead of domination, peace instead of war. Unless threatened, Vesh added quietly. Unless someone threatens those we have pledged to protect, Jake confirmed. Then, we remember what we are underneath the diplomacy and civilization. High Arbiter Kellyan's voice cut through the chaos in the council chamber like a blade through silk. Silence. The assembled counselors quieted immediately, though their various forms of agitation continued. Flickering bioluminescence, shifting scales, clicking mandibles. All the physical manifestations of species that had not faced a real existential threat in centuries. Analysis, Kellyan commanded. and tactical displays updated across every screen in the chamber. What they showed was terrifying in its simplicity. 53 confirmed hostile vessels, all heavily armed, moving in coordinated formation toward the nearest council world, and their identification signatures matched slaver organizations that had operated in lawless, outer rim territories for decades. They have never attacked council space before, the insect-like counselor said, her voice trembling. Why now? Because they saw our response to the pirate attack, Counselor Vesh said quietly, his scales now completely bronze with fear. They saw us rely on a single human ship. They think we are weak. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood perfectly still in the center of the chamber and watched the council members argue among themselves about defense, protocols and evacuation procedures and diplomatic solutions that everyone knew would not work. Lisa Grant leaned close to him and whispered, our long-range communications show Admiral Ryan Cooper and the Fifth Fleet are 6 hours out. They were conducting training exercises near the outer marker. Jake nodded slightly, but said nothing. Waiting, the argument in the council chamber grew more heated. Some members insisting they could negotiate with the slavers, others demanding immediate evacuation of civilian populations, a few suggesting they surrender selected worlds to avoid total annihilation. Not once did any of them suggest fighting back finally. After 10 minutes of increasingly desperate debate, High Arbiter Kellyan raised one crystalline appendage, and the chamber fell silent again. Ambassador Morrison, Kellyan said, and his voice carried something that might have been humility in his species. Humanity has demonstrated capability beyond what we understood. Would Earth be willing to assist in the defense of council space? The question hung in the air, and Jake let it rest there for several long seconds, making sure every council member understood the weight of what they were asking. You spent hours mocking humanity, he said quietly, calling us weak prey animals, biologically inferior. You dismissed our offers of help and used an attack on civilians as a test of our competence. Yes, Kellyan acknowledged. We were wrong. You were worse than wrong, Jake continued, his voice hardening. You were cruel. You let beings die to prove a point about human inadequacy. You watched Captain Burke risk his ship and crew just to see if we would run or fight. The council members shifted uncomfortably. And now, Jake said, now that you face a real threat, now that your comfortable peace is shattered, you come to the species you despised and ask for help. Counselor Vesh stood from his seat, his scales shifting through multiple colors before settling on a pale blue that indicated shame in his species. You are correct to be angry, Ambassador Morrison. The Council treated humanity with contempt we did not deserve to show. We judged you by standards that revealed our own prejudice rather than your true nature. He paused, clearly struggling with what came next. I apologize, Vesh said formally. To you, to your species, to Captain Burke and his crew. I was wrong, and I ask your forgiveness even though I do not deserve it. Jake studied the counselor for a moment, then looked around the chamber at the other assembled representatives who were watching him with expressions ranging from hope to fear to desperate pleading. One question, Jake said, directing his words to Kellyan. Will you remember this day? What do you mean? Will you remember, Jake clarified, that humanity could have refused, that we could have watched your worlds burn the way you watched us face 12 pirate ships alone, that we could have demanded concessions and territory and power before agreeing to help? Kellyan's crystalline form glowed bright blue. We will remember. Will you remember that we chose to help even after you insulted us, dismissed us, used us as test subjects? We will remember, Kellyan repeated, and other counselors echoed the words. Jake took a deep breath and activated his personal communicator. Admiral Cooper, this is Ambassador Morrison. Authorization code Morrison 7 Delta. The holographic display activated and showed the bridge of a massive warship, easily 3 times the size of the CS Horizon. And Admiral Ryan Cooper's weathered face appeared on the screen. "Ambassador," Ryan said formally, "I have been monitoring the situation. The Fifth Fleet is ready to respond. How many ships do we have available?" Jake asked. 15 vessels, Ryan confirmed, including the carrier Roosevelt. 4 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 4 support ships. The council members were doing mental calculations and coming to the obvious conclusion. 15 human ships against 53 slavers was still impossible odds, Admiral. Jake said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Council space is now under human protection. You are authorized to use any force necessary to eliminate the hostile fleet." "Understood," Ryan replied. "The Fifth Fleet will arrive in Council space in 5 hours. We will deploy defensive grid around core worlds and engage hostile forces upon contact. There is one additional order," Jake added. "Yes, Ambassador?" "Show them why Earth's military retired instead of disbanding," Jake said quietly. "Show them what happens when humanity stops pretending to be peaceful prey." Ryan Cooper's expression shifted into something that reminded Jake of Danny Burke's cold determination. "It will be my pleasure, sir." The communication ended and Jake turned back to face the council. "Admiral Cooper and the Fifth Fleet will defend your worlds. They will eliminate the slaver threat and ensure no hostile forces enter council space. 15 ships against 53. One counselor said nervously, "Can they succeed?" "The CSS Horizon was 1 ship against 12, Lisa reminded them. "And Captain Burke was operating under significant restrictions. Admiral Cooper has no such restrictions," Jake added. "And the Fifth Fleet has been training together for 8 years. They know each other's patterns. They trust each other completely. And they have weapon systems that will make the battle you observed look like a minor skirmish." 5 hours passed in tense silence throughout council space as civilian populations were evacuated from likely battle zones and defense stations activated protocols that had not been used in living memory. The slaver fleet continued its approach, confident and unhurried, expecting minimal resistance from species they had analyzed as physically weak and philosophically pacifist. What they encountered instead was humanity's Fifth Fleet, arranged in a defensive formation that military historians would later study for decades as an example of perfect tactical positioning. Admiral Ryan Cooper sat in his command chair aboard the carrier Roosevelt and watched the slaver fleet approach on long-range sensors. "Open a channel on all frequencies." His communications officer complied and Ryan's face appeared on view screens across the slaver fleet. "This is Admiral Ryan Cooper of Earth's Fifth Fleet," he said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who had commanded warships for 30 years. "You are entering Galactic Council space, which is now under human protection. You have one opportunity to change course and leave this system." Slaver Lord Vex, commanding the hostile fleet from his flagship, laughed at the transmission. 15 ships threaten 50? Humans truly are delusional prey animals. "You were warned," Ryan said simply, and closed the channel. What happened next would be recorded by council sensors and studied by every spacefaring species in the galaxy. The Fifth Fleet did not wait for the slavers to attack. Humans had learned through bitter experience that allowing enemies to strike first was a luxury only enjoyed by species with overwhelming defensive superiority. Instead, they attacked with the coordinated precision of pack hunters who had practiced this exact scenario hundreds of times. The carrier Roosevelt launched drone swarms that confused slaver sensors while cruisers moved into flanking positions using maneuvers that took advantage of human ability to function under high-gravity stress. Destroyer squadrons fired coordinated missile volleys that overwhelmed point defense systems. And when slaver ships tried to scatter, they found human vessels had already predicted their escape vectors and positioned to intercept in the council chamber. Screens showed the battle unfolding with tactical efficiency that looked less like combat and more like a carefully choreographed demonstration. Slaver ships exploded or went dark as human weapons found their targets with impossible accuracy. And the few times hostile fire connected with human shields, the Fifth Fleet's defensive systems held without wavering. Captain Danny Burke, watching from the CSS Horizon, now positioned to protect evacuated civilians, allowed himself a small smile as he saw his old friend Ryan Cooper demonstrate why Earth had maintained a military force even during 3 decades of global peace, not because humans wanted war, because humans understood that peace only existed when those who valued it were willing and able to defend it with overwhelming force. The battle lasted 97 minutes when it ended. 34 slaver vessels were destroyed. 17 were disabled and being boarded by human marines. And 2 had managed to escape into faster-than-light travel, carrying word of what they had with